For today's video, I want to talk about target priority. Now, I've done a target priority video in the past, but it was a little bit more of a simple, basic breakdown of how to think about it. For this video, I want to go a little bit more advanced. I want to show you what I'm thinking about in the match and why I choose the targets that I do. So to start, before we hop into a game and I start using examples, I'm going to sort of break down how I think about target priority in each game. The first thing you think about is target priority by team comp. Now, you might have heard me say in my videos that at the start of each game, I sort of wait and try and get a feel, see, and understand what the enemy team comp is before engaging in. Once I see what the enemy team comp is and I understand how it relates to my team, then I can sort of decide who I want to pressure and who I want to make sure to target so that way it helps best enable my team. For instance, since I'm frequently on Psylocke, and I know the enemy team has like a Wolverine, for instance, I know that Wolverine is going to try and set up and kidnap one of my tanks, so I'm going to try and beat him there and try and poke him before he gets access to. That way, by applying pressure to the Wolverine and forcing him to use his cooldowns to leave, that enables my tanks, but also gives me an opportunity to engage on the enemy a lot more freely. It'll also help you figure out who you need to target in the fight, especially early on, as some heroes charge their ultimates faster than others. So if the fight goes on a long time, you can know who's going to end up ulting and end up winning it for their team. It's important to understand how each and every hero's kit works, just so that way you understand either how to best counter it or how to best enable it on your team. The second thing I think about is target priority by pressure. Pressure is damage that doesn't necessarily lead to kills. It's more about applying efficient, intelligent damage to get the enemy team to back up or get out of a space that you don't want them to be in. For instance, you don't usually want to shoot the tanks, but sometimes you have to in order to pressure them to get them to back up so that way it enables space for your team to move forward. By taking an off angle as a DPS and applying pressure to those tanks, you can make the tanks back up, so therefore that gives more access for your other DPS or your tanks to be able to take space away from them, thus enabling your team to be able to have more space to work with. Another way to apply pressure is contesting off angles. By contesting off angles, you are shutting down enemies from being able to make a play on your team. A lot of times it only requires one singular kill in order to win a team fight, so what you're trying to do is you're always trying to contest those off angles and make sure that enemies aren't walking through those off angles for free. So by simply existing in those spaces and applying pressure, you can force people out of those angles. The last part of this is fighting for the objective. A good example for this is dive tanks. Captain America and Venom, for instance, love to dive onto the convoy and fight directly on the convoy in order to stall the objective while simultaneously applying pressure to the supports. When I know that the enemy team has a Cap or a Venom and we're on convoy, I'm looking out for that at all times, so that way I can apply pressure to those tanks to get them to get off of the convoy as fast as possible. I know that the odds of me actually killing the Venom or the Cap in those scenarios is probably pretty low. But by applying pressure to them directly and quickly, I'm able to get them off of the objective much faster, which allows it to move forward. Because even if I were to try and go and get kills on the enemy team, if the objective isn't moving, then it doesn't matter anyway. So even though it's always great to try and secure picks and secure staggers, I'm always on the lookout for who's stalling the objective and who's buying more time for their team. The third thing I think about is target priority by resource, attention, and position. Hero shooters are not just about who aims better. It's all about managing your resources and picking off people that are out of position and not paying attention. And these are the three advantages of what to look for. If you recognize, for instance, that someone misused a resource and they're out in a bad position, you can easily capitalize on that and end up getting a kill. Say, for instance, if Namor used his bubble, you recognize that in that moment he's incredibly weak. And if you have your resources and you're able to close that gap to be able to secure the pick on him, that would give an advantage for your team. Another advantage is something like attention. I frequently play very stealthy, and I wait for my tanks to engage in and pull out as much attention and resources onto them before I engage in on the enemy team. I am frequently all the way behind the team as they're not looking at me directly and they're unaware of where the damage is coming from. By attacking in the enemy's blind spots, it makes it much easier for me to take time to secure kills as I'm not at risk of dying or taking any damage. And the last one is position. If a player is deep enough out of position, it won't matter if they have resources or even if you're facing them head on. If they're out of position against your enemy team, it could be very easy to collapse on that person and secure a kill. And even though tanks are usually the hardest to kill, this could even happen to tanks as well. Because if a tank is too deep, with enough combined efforts from your team, you can still get a kill on a tank, even if they're sometimes actively getting healed at the same time. The fourth thing I think about is target priority by prevention. It's really great to be proactive about your plays because proactivity is rewarded quite frequently in the game. However, you want to shut down the enemy as well. A good example of this is attacking dive before they attack you. Dive capitalizes on the element of surprise, and one of the best ways to shut down the dive is to start shooting them before they even engage in on you, is to shoot them as they're setting up to try and dive on your team. Prevention also includes contesting off angles and perhaps fighting a poke hero like Hela or Phoenix for space, and making sure that they don't have a free angle on your backline. Another way to prevent the enemy team from making plays is shutting down enemies with ultimates. Your ability to understand and feel when enemy ultimates are about to happen is going to help give you a huge advantage in each of these fights. Ultimates are major win conditions, so you either want to try and kill the enemies with the ultimates, or you want to try and force the enemies to use ultimates suboptimally. By being able to predict those things like ultimates, you're able to do things like freeze a Strange out of his ult. By thinking about ultimates in terms of prevention, you're able to do things like predict a Strange ult, in which you can save your CC to try and stun him out of it so that way he doesn't make a play on your team. That way you're not throwing out valuable resources that you might need later. The fifth thing I think about is target priority by enabling. I know destroying destructibles is not interesting, but it's such a crucial and important part of the game. Some heroes destroy destructibles better than others. And frequently when I'm playing Psylocke, I am always shooting squids, totems, penny nests, all in order to help enable my teammates better. I know that I can get easy angles on things like penny nests to help destroy those, and that helps my tanks walk forward and take more space, which then helps enable me. Also, if I see an ally make a play and the enemy Loki uses totems, I'm going to try and shoot the totems right away so that way I can help enable him better. And if I have a dive hero like a Daredevil or a Spidey on my team and the enemy team is going to more, as Psylocke, I'm going to shoot the squid so that way it better helps enable my ally. Although I do this a lot on DPS, it doesn't really matter what role I'm playing, whether it be tank or support as well. I'm always trying to do what I can to best help enable my team. The other way to enable your team is by countering team counters. So for instance, like I said earlier, if I notice the enemy team has a Wolverine, as Psylocke, I like to try and poke him early so that way I keep him from being able to access my team. Because if Wolf gets a single grab on a tank, there's a decent chance he's going to win the fight for their team. And I know some people will say, well, why doesn't Invis just take care of that with their push and pull? It's because Invis's push and pull is a very valuable resource. Psylocke's left clicks aren't nearly as valuable of a resource as Invis's push and pull is. I would much rather Invis use that push and pull to try and make a play than try and only use it defensively. And that push and pull is the last line of defense. I don't want it to be the first and only line. So by predicting my enemy and poking him out, I force him to use his resources to get away and to back up, which then allows my Invis to be able to use her push and pull to use it more offensively. Another team counter is something like Flyers versus Hitscan. If you have an Ultron on your team and the enemy team has a Hela or a Phoenix, those Hitscan characters can easily poke out Flyers like Ultron. So if I apply a lot of pressure to the Hitscan characters, that means that better helps enable my Ultron as well. This is how, as a team, you can work together to where even if you're being counterpicked, it doesn't really matter as long as you're coordinating and combining your efforts. The last way I think about target priority is by win condition. So tracking ultimates is a good example. Your ability to track ultimates and either force ultimates to happen suboptimally or take them out before they get the chance to use them will help you win more games. It is a good idea to try and get in the habit of understanding support ult rotation and understanding which enemy support is going to be next up on their ultimate. Because if you go and dive a Luna, but it was Invis that was ready to use her ultimate and she ends up getting her ultimate off, then it doesn't really matter even if you might necessarily get the kill on the Luna, because the win condition was the Invis. Or for when it comes to DPS, if the enemy team has a Punisher and a Star-Lord, for instance, and you dive the Punisher, but the Punisher had just used their ult in the previous fight, it doesn't really matter if you get the kill on the Punisher if the Star-Lord ends up wiping your team. This is the reason why, even if you flex finals, it doesn't really matter, because if you're targeting the wrong people, it doesn't matter if you get kills or not because of the fact that you're not shutting down the win conditions. The next part of this is taking out their weakness, i.e. like a solo tank. Anytime you run one of anything, the moment you lose that role, you lose all of what that role provides. It's very easy to think about, say, for instance, if you're running solo support. If you kill the one in solo support, then obviously that team has no healing potential. But the same can also be true if the team is running a solo tank. If you're able to kill and wipe out that solo tank, then that means that team has no ability to control or hold space. And if a team is running a solo DPS and that solo DPS dies, that kill potential goes away with them. So while big ults with lots of kills make for great plays, sometimes winning the fight is as simple as just killing a singular target. Another thing to think about is taking out their worst player. If you notice that someone has unusually high deaths on the enemy team, that means that you can usually depend on them to make the mistake first. And what I do is when I see players like that, like say for instance a diving Punisher, I know to just wait for them because they're going to dive into me and end up making a mistake. And once they dive in, I'll secure the kill on them, and with the 6v5 advantage I've created for my team, then we'll just pressure the rest of them out. So when you notice that one player is performing much more poorly than the rest of the team, you can use that to your advantage and simply let that player make mistakes and wait for them and take them out, and then basically always have the game be in your advantage of a 6v5. And finally, taking out their best player. Sometimes there's one player on the enemy team that's performing so far above everyone else that there's not much that you can do. And this is where marking comes into play. The best way to shut down a really good player is to mark them the entire game. It might be very difficult to try and secure a kill on that player, but shutting them down and keeping them from making plays is a lot easier than simply trying to take them out. Or if you are going to solo ult anybody, then solo ult their best player. Anyway, that's sort of a general breakdown about how I think about target priority. And now I want to go into Photoshop and sort of show you what my brain is thinking about as I'm thinking about team compositions. Okay, here I have some examples of some tanks, DPS, and some supports. Now I'm going to make a fictional team comp where let's say I grab Rogue, I grab Venom, I grab Spidey, I grab Wolverine, I grab Rocket, and I grab Luna. If I'm playing Psylocke into this team composition, here are some of the things I need to think about. I know they have a rocket, which means I'm going to have to search out the res beacon and take that out first, so that way our first kill isn't completely negated. I know that they're running a very heavy dive and brawl composition, which means that I might need to spend a lot of time helping my backline because of the fact that Venom and Rogue can apply a lot of pressure, as well as the fact that they have a Spidey there as well. I also know that if the fight goes on long enough, I'm going to need to try and take out Rocket first because he gets his ultimate before Luna does. And I'll need to keep an eye out on the Wolf to make sure that he's not kidnapping any of my tanks. I know that sounds like a lot, but if you're wondering, well, how do you manage to keep an eye on all of this all at the same time? Because you can't do it all at once. You need to understand their resources and their cooldown rotations. All four of these heroes here work by diving in with their cooldowns and then diving back out and waiting for their cooldowns to come back. So if I preemptively poke at the Spider-Man and get him to leave with his resources, that means I have about 8 seconds in which he's not going to be in the fight until his resources come back. Rogue has pretty powerful resources, but once she leaves the fight, she's probably out for about 10 seconds. Rogue works in a very similar way, in which that once she uses her resources, she usually tries to use her abilities to get back out, and then she has to wait before being able to engage back in. Venom might soft dive to try and get us to use our resources early and then come back in afterwards, so I'll want to be mindful of that and make sure not to use everything on his first dive. But if I do enough damage and I force him to leave, once again, he's going to have to take time before he can re-engage back in. And Wolverine, I'm going to want to make sure that I poke him and not let him get through in the first place. Now let's mix the team comp up once again. Let's say now the enemy team has a Mag and a Venom. It also has a Psylocke and a Phoenix. We'll add Luna and Gambit in. This team comp is a lot more poke. I know that there's going to be a lot more consistent, constant pressure on my team instead of burst windows. Both Psylocke and Phoenix are really good at taking angles, which means I'm going to need to contest those angles, usually on the high ground. When it comes to Gambit and Luna, Gambit gets his ult faster than Luna, so if I'm going to target anyone, it's going to have to be the Gambit first. I know that Venom is probably going to time his dives at the exact same moment that his Magneto and Phoenix are applying pressure from the front. So the faster that I can push the Venom off of my backline, the faster that my supports can continue helping the front line that's getting pressured by the poke heroes and constant pressure from these three. By understanding each hero's kit, their resources, and what they do and how they like to get their job done, you can best set yourself up and your team for success because you know how to counter the enemy's strategy. And when you know how to counter it, you can see easier those windows of opportunity in which you can make plays. And no one person can take care of every problem on their own. Because even if I'm playing DPS and I'm peeling the Venom off of my backline, I would still need help from my allies to be able to contest the off angles from the Psylocke and the Phoenix. This is where it's important to recognize that if one person's already contesting an off angle, you might not need to be there. See what other areas you can get value from, and try and predict what your opponent's going to do so that way they waste their resources so that gives you an opening to be able to capitalize on the fact that they messed up. This is where the strategy of the game comes into play. I've seen a lot of people call Rivals a simple game or a casual game, but to be perfectly honest, this game actually has a lot of depth to it. As good as I am at being able to track abilities, ultimates, resources, and positioning, even still, there's stuff that I miss in the game. There are so many things to track and think about at all times that to me is actually very complex. All of my damage, my target priority has to be efficient. I'm always trying to think to myself of the best way to help enable my team. And honestly, I think if everybody thought about the game in the same way that I did, they wouldn't be so quick to call the game simple or casual. Anyway, that's a basic idea about how I go about trying to understand team compositions. Now I'm going to go into a couple of games and use those as examples. For this first example, instead of using the whole game, I'm just going to use the first objective. I'm going to do that because of the fact that this is a good example of how to shoot destructibles and how to best enable your team, but also how to best help your team when going up against dive. So that being said, let's jump into it. Now, as I was moving forward, I heard footsteps on my left-hand side. This alerted me that there were enemies behind us. This is an important reason as to why I stand perfectly still a lot of times to make sure that the enemy doesn't hear my footsteps. But now that I've been alerted, I'm going on the prevention side of target priority. A huge advantage you have is getting the drop on someone, but if I've got the drop on them already and they're already pushed this far away from their team, they're unable to get help, but I'm able to get my help from my supports who are nearby. So even if I just apply pressure to the enemies here, that puts my team at a huge advantage, as I can go from applying pressure to the flankers and immediately go to starting applying pressure to the rest of his team before he can get there to help. And as I was keeping an eye out for the Star-Lord, I see the Venom go in. When I see the Cloak and Dagger blind go off, that means that we're all going to be able to do more damage, so I try to pump in as much damage as I can into him to be able to help burst him before he can pop his E. Luckily, we're successful in being able to do so, and unfortunately the BP dives in and ends up getting one of our supports, but we still traded 2 for 1, and our spawn door is a lot closer than theirs is. So now this puts my team at a huge advantage for us being able to walk up and take a lot more space. A lot of people seem to overthink target priority and think that, oh, you should only be targeting the supports because they're the highest priority pick. But the supports are also usually the hardest to reach. And with dive players, they're going to come to you anyway. So if you can predict what they're going to do and shut them down as they dive, then that's a free pick, which then means getting to the supports is going to be a lot easier anyway. Penny Nest can be very misleading in terms of the amount of damage that they can do, and a lot of times supports will end up backing up into them. It also helps give us more space to walk around, and since I have long range damage and good mobility, it's best for me to try and destroy the nest rather than someone else. And even though Star-Lord was shooting at me, I was only doing enough damage to him to try and pressure him to go away because I knew I probably wasn't going to be able to secure the kill on him easily. And by hugging that left-hand wall, I was able to isolate myself to where it was just me, the Star-Lord, and the nest with my supports backing me up. And now by taking out the nest, I've better helped enable my team and allowed us to walk forward much easier, much more freely, and put the Penny in a much more difficult spot. Then there's a lot of enemies right directly in front of me, and after destroying the Penny nest, I move forward to start applying pressure, and I see the Star-Lord right past the Penny. Shooting directly at the Penny in this position isn't going to do anything, as the supports are going to be able to keep her up. So what I'm always going to try and do is try and shoot past the tanks to get to the squishies, which ends up leading to us getting a kill on the Star-Lord, and unfortunately he gets res, but at least we're taking the res down. As I dash to take a more aggressive angle, I hear the BP over my head. Because I know how BP's kit works and that he only gets more dashes if he can connect with me, I use my Cloak and Dagger team up to fade through his dash, so that way he's left in a vulnerable position. And even though I have Venom and BP diving me at the same time, I'm not going to panic and I'm not going to get stressed out as I focus on hitting the BP over the Venom, which, because he's out of his resources and I took the health pack, leaves me at an advantage to be able to secure the kill on him. Venom then goes up to try and target me, which is a good idea because he just saw me use my resources onto the BP. This is where instead of trying to continue to fight, I go back to my team to regain some of my health and reset my cooldowns. With all of my resources down, I am in a very vulnerable position. So I dash back to my team to get healed back up and destroy the Penny Nest once again to better help enable my team so that way they can now collapse on the supports and the Penny that are left. Seeing Venom dive to my backline to try and apply pressure, I go to try and help pull him off, but I immediately notice the Star-Lord start to engage in. I'm confident in my support's abilities to keep each other alive through the Venom dive, but what I don't want to have happen is I don't want that Star-Lord to follow up on the Venom's damage. So I shift my target priority once again to the DPS, who's the major threat. I also know that because he's in that position that his supports, who I just saw on the other side of the wall, cannot see that Star-Lord as he's out of their LOS. And now that I've taken out both of the enemy DPS, they have no real kill potential left on their team, which means that now I can take a more aggressive and extreme flank onto the enemy backline and try and help secure kills in the next high priority targets, which are the supports. I target the Luna first because she's the one at the very back. Despite the fact that Rocket usually charges his ult pretty quick, I targeted the Luna because of the fact that most people tend not to turn around when you're behind them. And if you target the person who's at the very back, you can lots of times end up securing the kill on them before the enemy team even realizes what has happened. And now that I've taken out the Luna and both DPS, I can immediately turn and take out the Rocket, which is the only other person left helping keep these tanks up, because killing the tanks will be a lot easier as soon as Rocket is down. And just like that, we're able to take the first point. Now you might have noticed that I didn't rush immediately to the enemy backline. I didn't autopilot down main and start pumping damage. I was immediately trying to figure out what the enemy team's strategy was going to be and how to counter against that. Because while supports might be high priority picks, sometimes those aren't the targets you want to go for first. If a tank is out of position and out of resources, that's a good target to attack. If you know an enemy DPS is going to dive your backline, as they enter in thinking they've got the element of surprise, you can get the element of surprise back on them and attack them before they even get a chance to do anything. Target priority in hero shooters is not as black and white as simply just saying kill their supports. You should always be thinking about resources, attention, and their position. Because it doesn't matter what role they play, if they mess those up, it's an easy kill for you, which means that it's easy for you to take the objective. And you also saw that even in the midst of the entire fight, I was also always trying to prioritize destroying the Penny Nest because I understand how Penny's kit works, because Penny's power is directly related to that nest. And by me constantly shutting down that nest, it means that my team has an easier time trying to take space away. Penny is amazing at bunkering down, and it's all due to that nest. And I understand that Psylocke's kit is one of the best counters to that nest. So even though there's some high priority targets to try and go for, sometimes the best thing I can do and the best free value is just simply destroying destructibles. Anyway, that was a good example of how destroying destructibles can help enable your team, but also how to fight back and prevent dives. And now I'm going to go into a full game in Domination, in which I'm constantly shifting my target priority and explaining my thought process along the way. This is a game from earlier on in Season 8, near the start of the season. This is before Cyclops and when Devil Dino was still new. During the Hero Select screen, we realized that we have 3 tank mains on our team. Instead of putting people on uncomfortable picks, we say let's just go 3 tank and see how it goes. Penny is going to be really good at bunkering down and holding down the objective, and Venom and Hulk are going to create a lot of chaos constantly on the enemy team. And as for me, since I am the solo DPS, I also recognize that I am the solo and greatest kill potential on our team. If I end up dying, that means my team's potential at being able to secure picks drops drastically. So it's crucial that I play this extremely smart. Immediately out the gate, I start looking to try and see what the enemy team's composition is. I'm not rushing in head first because I'm not exactly sure what I'm going up against. I notice they have a Punisher, and I notice they have a Devil Dino on my left. I start attacking the Devil Dino to try and lower his health so that way it gets him to back up, so that way we have greater access to the points, so that way Penny can stay set up. This is one of those examples where sometimes you need to shoot the tanks in order to make sure that the tanks back up so that way they're not taking space so your team can take more space back. After applying that pressure, now I'm going to try and see if I can't get an angle on the enemy team. When I go and I search for an angle to try and see the enemy backline, I notice that Mag is there. I start pumping damage into Mag and get him to use his self bubble on himself, so therefore he doesn't have it now. Instead of continuing to pump damage into the Mag, I go and I try and find another higher priority target. I've already pulled out his valuable resource, so I don't really need to do much more because I know I'm not going to be able to kill him. So I go and I start shooting at the squishies, and the moment it starts to seem too dicey, I get myself out of there. With the enemy team grouped up the way that they are, I'm not really seeing any openings here, and I'm not being impatient about it. And you can see that simply by applying pressure, we were able to cap the objective. When you're applying damage efficiently and effectively, it can lead you to capping an objective without needing to use too many resources. And by living in this off angle, I'm constantly trying to apply pressure to their squishies and see if I can't get a pick on someone like the Punisher, for instance. The Punisher knows I'm there though, and once he starts pulling out his shotgun, instead of taking a ballsy and risky play, I get myself out of there. In a close-up 1-to-1 fight with him getting the backup of his supports, he wins that exchange. And since we already have control over the objective, if I die here, that means the enemy team is going to be able to walk through the rest of my team because they lose that kill potential and take the objective back. So it's more important here that I get myself out alive and I try and search for a better opportunity to engage. Even in the midst of all the craziness and everything going on, I'm always trying to prioritize doing damage to the squishy targets like Wolverine and Punisher. If I'm shooting at them, that makes it easier for the 3 tanks that I have on my team. And I know it might look like I'm not doing a whole lot in this scenario, but Punisher and Wolverine are really good into triple tank. So the more they waste their time on me, that means it's easier for my tanks to hold down that objective. And since we've already capped the objective, being able to take it back with 3 tanks is going to be very difficult for them, especially because we have a penny bunkered up on it. So in this way, I'm enabling my team by being able to take some of the pressure off of them. So even just by playing safe and playing to live, I'm actually helping my team hold on to the objective for longer. As I get chased around by the Punisher, the moment I get low, I immediately retreat back to my team in order to stay alive, because there's no point in risking dying here. Once again, I'm the solo DPS, so if I die, I'm really going to screw over my team. And there's no point in taking risky plays when we already have control over the objective. During this entire time that we've held down this objective, our team has only secured 1 kill. By playing smart, applying pressure, and being able to pull resources and attention, you're able to do a lot without necessarily needing to team wipe the enemy team. I see the Wolverine setting up to try and make a play, and I preemptively start applying damage and pressure to him so that way he doesn't feel as comfortable engaging in from whatever angle he wants. We have triple tanks, so I really don't want the Wolverine to be able to get away with grabbing any one of my tanks. The moment that Hulk lands an exile on him, I'm immediately there to help try and follow up on that, which then forces the Wolverine to use his resources to once again back up and get behind cover and rethink about his engage. But the entire time that we do this, we still have the objective capped, which means that it's getting us closer to winning. As I continue to apply pressure to both the enemy DPS, one of my tanks ends up getting kidnapped. Luckily, our Rocket ends up using his ultimate to be able to keep him alive, which I dash in to try and help follow up on what my team is doing. Even in the midst of the crazy fight, I'm trying to keep an eye on the squishy targets and to apply damage to them specifically. And the moment I get my ult, I immediately pop it to try and secure more kills, which then forces the Luna to pop her ult suboptimally, as the blue team has already lost 2 members. And ults like Luna's ult is really great at keeping people alive, so if you're already down players, Luna ult gets a lot less effective. Which means that even though my ult didn't secure a whole lot of kills, it created a whole lot of value by pulling out an ultimate of theirs that now they don't get to use it going into the next fight. As Luna ult runs out, I see Wolverine walking forward, and once again, I go back to poking him, so that way Wolverine uses his resources to back up and get back behind cover. By applying pressure, I'm keeping him away from trying to once again make plays on my team. So even though we don't have an invis on our team, we don't need one. As long as I am continuously applying pressure to Wolverine and making sure that he doesn't get a grab, we don't necessarily have to counterswap him. As my team is holding space from one direction, I am taking an off angle in another direction and trying to apply pressure to once again the Wolverine, so that way he doesn't comfortably want to walk forward. Because in this situation, with them grouped up like that, I'm not seeing an opportunity to go in and get any kills, but by simply applying pressure, I can keep them from doing anything. I'd much rather have the Wolverine distracted by me than him trying to make a play on any of my teammates. By constantly trying to play to live and rotate my direction and applying pressure in different ways at whoever I can get access to, we can win the game by simply applying pressure rather than going for risky plays trying to get kills. I hear the Venom call out to dive the Magneto, so I follow up on what he's doing. Well, normally you don't really want to attack tanks. If you hear your teammate call out a pick, even a tank can fall if you apply enough pressure. So I know it's easy to get tunnel vision on what you're doing, but try to be hyper aware of what your teammates are saying and the calls that they are making. This is also extremely important as to why comms should be left open and clear, so that way you're focused on the game and making callouts rather than arguing about what happened in the game 5 minutes ago. We weren't able to kill the Mag, but luckily we were able to force him to use his ultimate in a suboptimal way. He did unfortunately get our Luna with it, but luckily we were still able to get a pick on the Wolverine. After letting my Venom dive in and engage first, he pulls the attention off of me, which makes it easier for me to target the Luna, who now isn't looking my direction. I hear a lot of people talk about how high Luna's damage is and how unfair it is to go up against, but that's probably because you're attacking her head on. By letting my Venom dive in and pull attention first, it makes it very easy for me to try and follow up and helps him secure the kill on her. I don't really like it when people make comparisons of how strong characters are in the practice range, because the practice range is not how the game is played. I very rarely have a difficult time going up against supports because I'm constantly trying to time my engages at the same time that my tanks are pulling attention off of me. And after immediately getting a pick on the Luna and dodging the Jeff ult, I'm now going to try and find my next high priority target. Knowing that the other DPS was already dead, Punisher was the only real threat. The odds of me killing Jeff were probably pretty low, but the odds of me being able to kill a Punisher were much greater. And if I take him out, that means the enemy team's kill potential drops drastically. So even though Jeff is a high priority target, it is easier for me to bring value to my team by taking out the Punisher than chasing the Jeff around. Luckily, I was able to get rezzed and immediately get myself back into the fight. And we still have access over the objective, so I'm not too worried about being able to hold on to it because we do have 3 tanks. I don't want to get distracted by pumping damage into the Dinosaur and the Magneto at that moment. And while the Dinosaur and Magneto are slightly distracted by me, I'm trying to get myself into a position in which I can try and make a play elsewhere. But if the tanks are looking at me, hopefully that creates an opportunity for my team to be able to do something on the other side of the map. Luckily they are, and my team ends up getting picks, and I flank all the way around to help follow up on the Punisher. This is why I stress the importance of playing to live. By pulling attention and resources onto yourself, you put them off of your team. Sometimes value isn't seen directly by damage or healing numbers or damage blocked. Sometimes the value you create is by pulling attention away from your team, which then allows your team to be able to make plays elsewhere. And once our team had a huge advantage, it makes it much easier then to collapse on the Dino and be able to get the kill on him. And just like that, despite the fact that the enemy team had Punisher and Wolverine as we ran triple tank into it, we were able to secure the first point 100% to 0. Now we'll jump into the second round. At the end of that first round, I didn't actually get a whole lot of finals, but I was able to apply a lot of pressure towards the Wolverine and the Punisher and pull attention off of my tanks, which allowed them to be able to make plays. I wasn't always trying to dive the enemy backline. I was thinking to myself, how can I best enable my team to help them do what they do best? Because everyone was already on their best heroes. So by understanding my team comp and the enemy team comp, I had to come up with a strategy based off the team comp that I had and the team comp that the enemy had. Not every game is played exactly the same, and learning to analyze and understand team compositions will help you go a long way. Immediately as I go up, I go and try and take an angle. As I do that, the Magneto pushes forward, and I start applying pressure to him to be able to get him to back up and back away from the point. Once he turns on me, I get back out to safely as both him and the Dino are attacking me directly. In this situation, I prioritize my survival. The way that I'm helping my team in this moment is by having both of the tanks attacking me. As long as I survive, they're not getting a whole lot of value out of it. Instead of getting distracted by the dinosaur, I try to keep the pressure up on the Magneto, who was already low from the start from our previous engagement. The moment I hear the Punisher ult, I know I immediately have to get myself to safety. Everyone's priority in that moment is their survival. As I get myself out, I go to a deep flank. I know that I'm close to my ultimate, and the moment that I get it, I rip it right away. Unfortunately, they end up stacking inside my ultimate, but the Venom sees the play that I'm making, and even without needing to communicate, he dives in to help follow up on it, which then leads to us securing a kill on one of the enemy supports. After I popped my ult and got to safely, I immediately turned to the side, and I know that because of the fact that the Venom is distracting the Luna and the people at the back, I knew that the Punisher wasn't going to get healed. So as I looped around and saw the Punisher, I immediately targeted him because I knew he'd be a free and easy pick. Luckily, at about the same time, our Venom ends up getting a kill on the Luna as well. But no supports left to back up the enemy team, and the combination of the rocket ult, it makes it very easy to eliminate the Dino and target him first and be able to take him out, and then follow up and chase the Moon Knight for another stagger. As you can see throughout all of these fights, the target priority is not black and white. It doesn't just go for supports. Sometimes it's applying pressure to tanks, sometimes applying pressure to DPS, and sometimes it's flanking the enemy supports. It all depends on the enemy team's resources, attention, and position. As the enemy team starts walking up, I set myself up into an off-angle position. I see the enemy team walking down main, and I position myself in the top right to try and contest this off-angle. I either want to make sure no one comes up here, or I slow their ability to pass through an off-angle. As the enemy team sends Dino and some others up there to try and pressure and take us out of that off-angle, I apply pressure right back to them to get them to back up. Since we have control over the objective, once again, I'm trying to apply damage, hopefully to secure kills, or at the very least, apply damage which forces them to back up so that way they don't feel comfortable walking to the objective. In this situation, because we have control over the objective, what I want them to do is use their ultimates or use their resources off of the objective, so that way we're not having to fight directly on it. And by applying damage to the Dino, I'm trying to force him out of this angle. But I don't want to get too tunnel vision, and the moment I see the Moon Knight and I see a better opportunity to try and attack a higher priority target, I go for him. I unfortunately don't get the pick on him, but it's not worth me trying to take a risky play because once again, I don't want to die as we already have control over the objective. Especially since we're down Venom, I want to try and take a smarter play. Luckily, despite the fact that the enemy team ultimates, with combined damage, we're able to end up securing a couple of kills. And as I have Mag and Moon Knight shooting at me and attacking me, that means there's attention pulled off of my team. Two people using their resources on me and not successfully being able to take me out, which is a good exchange for me and my team. So all I need to do when I'm being targeted by multiple people is just prioritize my survival and get them to waste their resources and attention on me. And even though we were down a player, because of my team's smart ultimate rotation, we're able to hold on to the objective for longer. And as I fall back to collapse with my team, I notice that the Devil Dino is surrounded by the Penny ultimate. And even though it's Devil Dino and he's a huge massive tank, because he's so far out of position, I know that if we apply enough damage to him, we can end up securing the pick on him. This is where even if you notice a tank that's out of position and manage their resources badly, you can easily combine your damage to be able to secure a kill on them. Tanks might be hard to take down, but if they are out of position and they mismanage the resources, they will fall just like everyone else. I wasn't sure if there was anyone on my side, so I went to investigate as I was going up to contest the off angle. Once again, I'm trying to prevent the enemy team from making any plays on my team, so I want to be aware of my surroundings. I don't want to get caught autopiloting, because if an enemy predicts me autopiloting to a spot, they could end up getting the drop on me. As I hang out in the off angle, I'm playing extremely safe in this moment. I'm just poking from really far away as I get them to shoot at me and pull attention off of my teammates. And you might think I'm playing a bit too passively, but if you notice, I actually am really close to my ultimate. Knowing that they don't have support ults, there's really no reason for me to take any huge risky plays because that ultimate could be the game-winning play that we need to make. And once I charge up my ultimate, I tried to dash and use my ultimate, but I ended up failing and just popping my ultimate and dropping on top of the Punisher. But I ended up getting the pick on him anyway, which is fantastic for us because he was the only one on the enemy team with an ultimate, which means that he was their win condition. And because I'm ulting on the enemy backline, Mag uses his bubble to try and save the Luna, which ends up not working out anyway, as the rest of my team is just securing kills on the point. And that's game. 100-0, 2 rounds in a row. I felt that this game was a really good example of target prioritization and applying pressure that really wasn't about any huge plays. It was a very slow, methodical game. And even though we were going up against a Punisher, a Moon Knight, and a Wolverine with triple tank, we really didn't have an issue. And this is because of the fact that if you apply pressure in a smart and intelligent way, you can help enable your teammates. You don't always want to race past the enemy team and try and go for the supports. Sometimes there's easier picks for you to get. And sometimes by simply applying pressure, you can secure objectives even without necessarily getting any kills. This is why I stress the importance of understanding the fundamentals of the game instead of just focusing on things like counterswapping. While counterswapping might give you an advantage against certain heroes, if you aren't thinking strategically about how to best utilize that damage and who to target, then it doesn't really matter anyway. Your target priority is going to change based off of what your team comp is versus the enemy team comp. It's going to change based off of the enemy team's resources. It'll change based off of their position and their attention, and their ultimate ability rotation. Target priority in the midst of the fight needs to be a lot more fluid, and your ability to recognize when someone is out of position or has mismanaged their resources is going to be what really helps you secure wins. The faster you can process all this information, the better chance you have of winning. Don't run into every fight without thinking, and even in the midst of every fight, make sure you understand who you're shooting and why, and what value exactly that's bringing to your team. In hero shooters, aim is important, but what's even more important is all those hidden things that you're not able to see. It's understanding resources and heroes' strengths and weaknesses, and making sure you know how to apply pressure and keep that constant momentum in your favor. So that way, even if you're playing into a team of counters, you still know how to beat them through strategy alone. Anyway, that's my video on target priority. I know this is technically the second video I've done on this, but I did go a little bit more advanced into it. And if these more advanced lessons interest you and you found it helpful, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see if there's any other older guides that I made that I can try and go into a bit more detail on. And as always, thank you for watching.